So our main goal is to strengthen the IFSA community, and the second goal, and basically the means of how we want to strengthen the community, is to take learning beyond the classroom. And this means, consequently, enhance forestry education. Therefore, here we are with this webinar series, trying to indeed enhance forestry education. And as we already mentioned, today we're going to learn about healthy forests for healthy humans.
This is a kindly reminder of the house's rule. Please kindly mute yourself on the entirety of the event. For the Q&A portion, please send your question through the chat box or use the raise hand function. In case of internet connectivity issues, kindly take note of the Zoom credentials so that you may rejoin our conference. This webinar is being recorded for documentation purpose, so please keep an appropriate behavior during this session. And lastly, if you're having any technical difficulties or issues that we should address, you may message any of the organizers. Next slide.
Now let's head to presenting you the speakers of today's episode. The first speaker is Geert de Vries from Wageningen Environmental Research from Netherlands. A few words about Mr. de Vries is that he's an environmental psychologist at the Wageningen Environmental Research in the Netherlands, which is part of the Wageningen University and Research. He conducts quantitative research on cultural ecosystem services, including recreation, landscape appreciation, but especially the effect of contact with nature on human well-being. He has co-authored several influential papers, and he has been one of the advisors of the World Health Organization on green space and human health in an urban context.
After the presentation of our speaker, we are going to have another presentation in charge of forests from IPSA, from Indonesia, Turkey, Nigeria, and Mexico, regarding sustainability and what the strategies they are developed in their own LCs.
So, Mr. Scherp, the floor is yours. You get 20 minutes.
Thank you. Nice to be invited for this presentation. I will try to share my screen now. I hope you see it. Okay. Yes, this presentation is about a report written by a global forest expert panel from the IUFRO and was launched in the International Day of the Forest 10 days ago, I think, about now. This presentation that I'm going to give is based on one given by Cecil Konadek, the coordinating lead author of the expert panel, as presented during the International Day webinar at which the report was launched. Okay, well, forests have many functions and effects. As you can see here, they are linked to many different sustainable development goals, but health is surely one of them, and the report focuses on this one. But it's important to keep in mind that forests have other functions than improving human health and well-being. Here you see a picture of the report on the right, and you see also the global forest expert panel in action. Well, in action, we're all very silent sitting there, but in actuality, we had a couple of intense days producing the report, which is quite lively, quite a large report. And in the expert panel, we try to make use of new frameworks with regard to the relationship between nature and humans. So from the old traditional framework positioning human at the top of the pyramid to more putting humans on equal footing with other animals. And this is perhaps most clearly done so in the One Health approach, linking animal health to human health. Was originally very much focused on zoonotic diseases, but it's now, the term is broadening up, and there are also other terms, eco-health, which looks at the health of the ecosystem as a whole, including humans in the ecosystem. And there's also the concept of planetary health. It's more from the health side, and it says, okay, human health is depending to some extent on the health of the larger environment, the ecosystem. And these three concepts, they tend to grow to each other, and there's now substantial overlap. I already mentioned One Health is now broader than it used to be in the beginning, looking only at animal health and human health. It's now, I would say, going in the direction of eco-health also. I will mainly present on this chapter, because this chapter I was the lead author of. Is the evidence base regarding relationship between forests and trees and human health and well-being. It was written by a large group of experts from all over the world, 25 to be precise. When we started doing this, we said, oh, can we manage that? 25 authors. But we succeeded in doing so quite well, I think. The chapter is structured by life stage. So roughly children, adolescents as one stage, adults and elderly. And within each life stage, we focus on diseases and disorders that are especially relevant for that life stage. I will mainly talk about summary tables regarding what the available evidence shows based on expert judgment, not on systematic reviews. The report itself is not a systematic review, but often the experts, they refer to several systematic reviews if they are available. It's important to note that a lot of the scientific studies do not look at forests or trees in isolation, but usually look at different types of green space too, and more often than not, they do not distinguish between the different types of green space, but they look at the total amount of vegetation that's present in a residential area mainly. There are different studies, but that's the bulk of the studies. Okay, then the summary of the health outcomes. We started with the children. Well, actually already before that, the prenatal phase. And there's evidence that, for example, already the birth weight of babies depends on how green the residential environment of the mother is. So if the residential environment of the mother contains more green space, then the birth weight of the babies tends to be a little bit higher. When we go to childhood and adolescence, we see especially strong relationships for neurodevelopment and mental health of the children. For example, there are quite a few studies looking into ADHD. So if the residential environment of the child contains more green space, then the prevalence of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is lower. There are fewer children that have that disorder. There's also some evidence for example, malnutrition, but that's mainly in forest-dependent communities where those studies are conducted. And then in that case, the forest offers some sources of nutrition that are conducive to the good health of the child. Let's look now at for the adults. Well, some people already mentioned that they were interested in mental health in the beginning and on Slido, and there have been quite a few studies looking into that, and the evidence is rather positive. That is, mental well-being of people is associated with the amount of green space in the residential environment. There have also been quite a few studies on this during the COVID pandemic. And some of these studies show that even a window view on vegetation is already positively associated with your mental well-being. So only looking at it already is associated with your well-being. There's also evidence of a relationship between nature, contact with nature, and spiritual well-being. As for physical health, the evidence is strongest for cardiometabolic health, heart diseases, etc. For respiratory and allergic outcomes, it's mixed evidence, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. For example, trees can help to improve the air quality, having a positive effect. But some types of trees also produce pollen that can exacerbate complaints, respiratory complaints, for example. So that's more mixed. And for cancers, the evidence is also rather mixed. It could have something to do, for example, with if you have an attractive green environment, you're maybe are outside more. Also, more sunlight could increase your chances for getting skin cancer. But overall, for cancers and for some other diseases, there have been relatively few studies looking into that. Then for the elderly, well, there's strong evidence that green space and contact with green space, forests and trees and other types of green space is positively associated with your cognitive functioning and can postpone at least the occurrence of dementia. Also, for this age group, life stage, there's a positive, strong positive association for mental health and well-being, and also for longevity and mortality. So people that live in greener environments tend to get older and older in good health compared to others. And usually in this type of study, it's corrected for the socioeconomic position of the people. So if you're equally wealthy or poor and you have a green environment, then people tend to live longer and tend to live longer in good health. Summary of the evidence. So for most health outcomes, the observed associations are predominantly beneficial. In a small number of cases, they're mixed. The evidence of beneficial association was stronger for some outcomes, such as mental health and well-being and longevity, than for others, cancers, due to fewer studies having been conducted on the latter. Well, that's very positively formulated. So there's mixed evidence, and if you do more studies, well, we do not know yet what the outcome will be for cancer. For some health outcomes, the evidence is more mixed, with both positive and detrimental associations being observed, for example, with the respiratory diseases. And we know more about some contexts than others. Most studies have been conducted in high-income countries, and within those countries, especially in urban areas, also in low-income countries, if there's studies being done, mostly it's with the focus on the urban areas. And we expect that there may be substantial differences in the relationship between forest and human health in the rural areas. The difference between countries is likely to be much larger than in urban areas all over the world. But even in urban areas, of course, you have differences. In the more tropical areas, the shaded tree can offer maybe much more important than in northern countries, for example. Most of the research that I just presented or summarized looks into associations and not really into effects. Most of the studies are cross-sectional studies with the environmental characteristics, the amount of green space, the presence of forest, the distance to forests being measured at the same time as the health aspect. And then you can say, okay, is there an association? Already mentioned, usually those studies, they do correct for socioeconomic position and try to exclude it as an alternative explanation that wealthier people are more healthy and live in greener environments than poorer people. So to some extent, that alternative interpretation of the association is excluded. But it doesn't mean that the association is causal in nature, with the forests or vegetation being the driving force leading to the more positive health status. So you would like to know much more about the pathways and the relative importance of the different pathways that could explain the beneficial association between forests and other types of nature and human health and well-being. And I've listed a number of pathways that are mentioned in the report, in chapter 2 report. One is stress recovery and attention restoration. People tend to relax in natural environments more, have a better, have a more positive mood, less negative mood when they are in nature than in other areas, in built-up areas, for example. So that's an important one, and this pathway has been rather extensively studied in experimental studies. And in experimental studies, you can draw firm conclusions regarding the causality, because you have control for anything else. So the only thing that can produce the difference between your experimental conditions is your experimental factor, which is then exposure to nature or built-up environment, for example. Another one pathway is that an attractive green environment, such as a forest, can draw people out of their homes and go for a walk or other types of activities, so stimulate physical activity. Especially in high-income countries, a lack of physical activity is very prominent. Nowadays, those people, they don't have to be physically active for their jobs. So often means that they have to be physically active in their leisure time. And then they have other ways of spending their leisure time. And nowadays, many people, they have to be seduced to be physically active, whereas in several decades ago, it was often more so the case that their job already involved a substantial amount of physical activity, for example. Okay, if you have an attractive outdoor green environment, natural environment, such as a forest, it's not only attractive for you, it's also attractive for other people in your environment, your neighbors, for example. So that type of environment can facilitate social context and social cohesion, especially when you look at small neighborhood parks. If you have a very large city park, you will also see other people being present, but that are not your neighbors, and it's not likely to quickly lead to a feeling of social cohesion. But at a neighborhood scale, a small park where you meet your neighbors can help to create a sense of social cohesion, and don't expect that you will give each other the key of your home to watch over that when you're on holiday, but it's more starts with recognizing who your neighbors are and greeting them. So it can be very in a minimal way and still important. For example, it can also lead to a sense of social safety, in the sense that okay, my neighbors know me and I know my neighbors, and if I walk here and somebody else threatens me, I trust my neighbors will come to my aid. Or for elderly people, if I trip over and fall, my neighbors will help me, will do something, that type of thing. The fourth one is the composition of the human microbiome. Contact with nature can have a positive effect, is the idea, on your microbiome, especially your gut microbiome is important for your immune function. So if the composition is improved, a more healthy composition, then you're less likely to catch certain diseases. This one is also rather new. There has been relatively little research done on that. The fourth is very relevant with regard to climate adaptation, the mitigation of heat stress by vegetation, especially trees, not only due to evaporation, but also offering shade. The next one is improvement of air quality by vegetation. Well, That's a bit a difficult one in the sense that, for example, trees can also have a negative effect on the air quality because they may block airflows and in that way keep the dirty air trapped in the areas where a lot of people are. So one of the most effective mechanisms to improve the air quality in cities is to have the dirty air diluted by clean air coming in, but then there should be a flow of air and it should not be blocked. But vegetation can trap fine dust and in that way improve air quality. And the next ones are disease transmission regulation. That's more in the I think lower and middle income countries and in rural areas than in the urban areas, which I am self more familiar with. And for the forest dependent communities, there's also the issue of the food provision and also forest-based medicine. Of course, forest-based medicine can also be relevant for people living in cities, but then it's more indirect. It's produced in one place and then transported in the other place. So then there's not as much a clear spatial link anymore. Sometimes I mentioned forests can have a detrimental association with human health and well-being, and it's important that that in part can be due to ourselves because the forest is degraded by previous human behavior and interactions. So that's an important one to note. In the other chapter, there's more attention for the different contexts. So I already mentioned that a lot of research is focusing on the urban environment and urban forests. Rural environments, for example, the forest can be important for the livelihood, timber production, forest-based recreation, offering jobs. And for approximate the forest-dependent communities, forest can be important for subsistence, offering food, shelter, firewood, etc., medicines. So there's a chapter that looks more into that and with a stronger focus on forest specifically than the chapter on the evidence base, which also looks at other types of vegetation. There's also a chapter looking in forest in response options. How can we improve things? And it's divided up in 5 themes. One of the first is access to forest. Sometimes it's about property rights. Rural and forest dependent areas, it's important. Can you access the forest and get out of it what you need, or are you prohibited to do so? In more urban areas, it's another area. It's more the forests are usually public areas, but the distribution of forests, the access to forest in the sense of how near is the forest can differ. So there's the issue of environmental justice, the distribution of forest and other types of green space over the city. And it's well known that in most places, the more wealthy parts of the city are greener than the less wealthy parts, for example. Not always the case, but it often is. And there's also the question of the quality of the forest or the park, the green space, with the quality being higher, better maintenance, also facilities in the area, in the wealthier neighborhoods. Besides the access, there already talked a bit about the spatial dimensions, and then you also have the design of the forest. How can you design a forest that it is most beneficial for human well-being? The picture on the top right is about even the soundscape, sounds of a forest. There are also studies showing that, for example, birdsong can have a relaxing effect and can also reduce the negative effect of the annoyance of traffic noise, for example. And the last one is more about communication, education, and how we could improve the connectedness with nature. There are studies showing that the well-being benefits of contact with nature are higher for those people that feel more connected with nature. At the same time, it's also the case that connected with nature is very important for the social support for nature conservation. So it's important in different ways, directly for the size of well-being benefits, but also indirectly for the conservation of forest, so that they also in the long run can provide benefits. Brings me to the key messages of the report as a whole. The first message is based more or less on the evidence base. The forest, trees, and green spaces impact human health across all life stages. The second one is mostly the outcomes are positive. They outweigh the negative outcomes. There are negative outcomes. You can have forest fires. You can, in some cases, have zoonotic diseases with factors being present in forest. But the positive outcomes outweigh the negative ones. We talked a little bit about the pathways, how the benefits come about, and that it's the importance of the pathways is strongly depends on context, and it's also to some extent dependent on individual lifestyles. I talked about nature connectedness making a difference. You could say that there's likely to be a kind of almost genetic component that the human species grew up in natural environments, and we still often like those environments if they are non-threatening. But there's also a kind of cultural component. If people feel more connected with nature, for example, because of their childhood, where they brought up, that also has an influence on how beneficial the contact with nature is. The fourth measure is that forest health relations offer solutions to global crisis. You can think of climate adaptation, reducing heat stress, for example. And the fifth key message is that we need integrative and cross-sectoral approaches to improve the forest health link. Forest and health is not self-evident. That's also why I think IUFRO asked for a global forest expert panel to write this report, to bring the available evidence together and disseminate it, because it's important, the link between the natural environment and human, also human health and well-being, which also is clear from the concepts such as One Health, planetary health, eco-health becoming more popular. But
Mr. Chair, we need to slowly wrap it up. Thank you.
I will do so. Knowledge gaps and research priorities. Well, I already said we mainly have cross-sectional studies. We need more rigorous studies to be able to show that it's really a causal effect. Research is focused on the high-income countries, the urban areas. We need more research from other countries and areas, especially rural areas, to make sure that the benefits are recognized. It's important to make them more explicit, and then, if it's possible, to assign a value, because always there's trade-offs have to be made. It helps if you can more clearly show what the benefits are and the size of the benefits. Some broadening of scope and the strengthening of the science policy interface, and we hope that this report contributes to the strengthening of the science policy interface. So the report is not aimed at fellow scientists also doing research in this domain, but especially to policymakers and other sectors. This is the final slide. So we need a transformation towards more integrative policies and initiatives, and a need for restoring the disturbed forest people relationship, especially yeah, we need transition from the short-term profit-oriented type of relationship to the more sustainable type of relationship with also ample attention for people and planet. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. It's at least intuitive and create a lot of food for thought, most definitely. Now we can proceed to a small Q&A session, and I would like to invite all the participants to access again Slido. It's the same QR and the same link if you haven't already left the page. And we would like to hear your questions. At this point, we got 10 minutes. We will try to address most of them if possible, but please bear in mind that we might need to leave some things aside, unfortunately. All right, we already have a few questions. And we can start with the first one, maybe. So, did you measure how the green space impacts health in different regions? If the people in the tropical countries benefit more because it's always green, for example?
That's a good question, but there has been very little research on seasonal effects in those areas where there are differences. In some seasons, the trees are in leaf, and other seasons they are not. Yes, difficult to answer more benefits because it's always green. It makes sense to think so. I do know that when it comes to air quality, that coniferous trees tend to be more effective because they're also green in wintertime. But for other mechanisms, yes, I'm inclined to think so, but there has been very little research. You have the seasonal affective disorder, so people tend to be more depressed in the winter half year. But yes, is that due to the trees having no leaves anymore, or is it also more the temperature that is lower in my part of the world, at least?
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is like this. So, is the 330-300 rule from Cecilia Koinendijk significant in contributing to forest and human health?
Well, it's a catchy rule because of the 330-300. Actually, the precise numbers are not evidence-based. You could have picked different numbers, but because it's catchy, it's picked up a lot, and it can help policymakers to pay more attention to the importance of forests and trees for human health and well-being. Of course, with Cecil being an urban forester, he focused a little bit strongly on the trees. But okay, yes. Well, and yeah. So it can help to generate policy attention. Yes, I think yes, even though it's not completely evidence-based, and for example, it ignores that agricultural areas could also have a positive function, especially for people living at the fringe of the city. So it's not only forests and trees, and if it's unclear whether it needs to be 30% or 20% could already be a quite nice start. So I think it can help, even though it's not completely evidence-based. On the other hand, compared to other guidelines, I think it's the one that's most in line with the current evidence, because it also pays attention to having trees very close to home. Older guidelines, rules of thumb, focus more on access to larger green areas, which then, according to guideline, can be further away from home. So the 3300, the 3 starts with the view, having a view on 3 trees from your window from home. So in that sense, it's most in line with the scientific evidence.
Thank you once more. The next question is, what are the other ways to ensure that urban communities have adequate access to green space in the middle of rapid urbanization?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a problem that has not been solved. Also in the Netherlands, we have an increasing population, and we need a lot of new additional houses. And for a part, the idea is to have those new houses in the existing urban areas. So densification, meaning higher population densities, meaning fewer people having a domestic garden. And even if you preserve the present green space, parks, forests, it means that more people are likely to make use of those areas. So the pressure on the area will become larger, which could be a negative from an ecological perspective, too much pressure, but also from a social perspective. If you know that many people visit a park or a forest to unwind, to relax, when it becomes very, very busy in the park, that function may not be fulfilled to the same extent anymore.
A very interesting question that we have here is about the indigenous knowledge, which is a lot according to the person that has put the question, regarding forest and human health, and is present in many parts of the world. So does this play any role in assessments like this, the indigenous knowledge?
Well, in our chapter, it did not to a large extent, and personally, of course, you have experiential knowledge, traditional and local indigenous local knowledge, or traditional ecological knowledge, but sometimes a little bit mixed with I think cultural aspects. So for myself, I think should take it seriously, but for some part, take it seriously as a hypothesis more than as something that is already proven. And our chapter is mainly based on scientific articles, and up till now, I don't think there's a lot of that type of knowledge already a part of the scientific evidence base. But it's something to take seriously, to look into. But there's a difference between indigenous beliefs and indigenous knowledge. And it's not always clear what's what.
I see. Thank you. We have some more minutes for a few more questions. Another question is, how did you conduct the evaluation of the forest impact on health?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? How did?
Of course. How did you conduct the evaluation of the forest impact on health?
Okay, well, it's based on expert judgment, the tables, the summary tables that I showed. But then again, the authors of the chapter are all experts in their field, and most of them, at least several of them, also have, for example, conducted systematic reviews themselves, on which we base the chapter. So the chapter itself is not a systematic review, a new systematic review, but it's to some extent based on already conducted systematic reviews. But it's an expert judgment. The pluses and the zeros and the minus, yes.
Thank you. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. more. How do you define green space? Are there any differences in the impact by different forms of vegetation?
I was involved in another project looking at specifically in differences between types of vegetation and effects on mental health. And the conclusion from that report is that there are not many studies directly comparing the different types of vegetation, making it difficult to draw firm conclusions. And furthermore, most types of vegetation are beneficially associated with health and well-being. Actually, and this is not in the report, but I think it's an intriguing question: to what extent is the amount of contact with nature, with vegetation, important, and to what extent is the type, the quality of the vegetation important? If you think of street trees, well, it may not be very special, but if it's in your own street and you can even look out on it from your window, you have a lot of contact. So the amount of contact it can differ, well, let's say by a factor 100 between a street tree and then a forest that's located 1 kilometer away, which you rarely visit. So the forest will allow you a more immersive nature experience than the street tree. But then again, your exposure to that forest is much lower. So then quality should make a lot of difference to compensate for the less contact. Sometimes I use a medical metaphor. What's better, occasional shot of high quality nature or a more continuous drip of very ordinary everyday nature?
All right. Thank you very much for taking the time to answer these questions. And my apologies to the participants that we cannot cover all the questions that have been put in Slido. If Mr. Scherp is okay with that, maybe you could share your email or any other means of communication for participants to pose some questions. It's only up to you. And
Yes, I think you have my email.
Perfect. Thank you very
you
much.
can put it in the chat.
Awesome. We will do it right ahead.
Okay.
And right now, I think we can continue to the next slide, so we can proceed. Gabby, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcia. And thanks again, Professor Serbs. Well, right now we are going to start the second part of today's activity. And we are going to start with the LC's presentation. We are going to start with the presentation for LC IPB from Indonesia in charge of Raka Mandala. Raka, you have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Good evening, participants, good evening, members, good evening, viewers of this event. So should I just share my screen? Okay, as a representative of IFSA IPB Indonesia, I would like to present a program that we held earlier this year and one last year on the importance of mangroves in Indonesia. As we all know, Indonesia is a subtropical country, subtropical archipelago with a lot of mangrove forests, a lot of biodiversity in those mangrove forests. So let's start. Okay, so IFSA LC IPB created a program on planting mangrove trees at Mangrove Ecotourism Center Peak. It's called Indah Kapuk Beach in North Jakarta earlier this year, and an open donation for mangrove seed on 22nd of August last year. Okay, so why are mangroves important, especially in Indonesia, a subtropical archipelago? First of all, the obvious part is the loss of biodiversity, a massive biodiversity. Sorry. And one of the causes of this biodiversity also affects the, you could say, the human ecology factor of these destructions, which is they cause flooding. 50% of mangrove destructions causes flooding, which not only endangers humans but also endangers animals such as the proboscis monkey, an endangered monkey in Borneo, the Javan langur, a Javan monkey, a variety of snake species, water monitors, and a variety of bird species with the water birds or non-water birds. And they also absorb heavy metals that could um, heavily pollute the water quality, the water system. Um, as we all know, the majority of Indonesia's population still consumes water straight from the source. They still consume water straight from rivers, from lakes, from brackish waters. So um, it is a serious matter for us to take part in. Next, how it may become sustainable. First of all, is regulation. Of course, we can't just plant these trees and not regulate their well-doing, regulate the human activity. A lot of these mangrove forests are destroyed due to human activity, due to illegal logging, due to trash being thrown around irresponsibly. So it is very important for rangers, for conservationists, for forestry workers to regulate these mangrove forests, just as it is important to regulate other forests in Indonesia. Second, monitoring. Monitoring is more uh, to the ecology part of the regulation one. We have to monitor the uh, biodiversity. We have to monitor the animals, the flora, the fauna. We have to not just regulate the human activity. We have to regulate the natural, um, the nature that takes part in these mangrove forests. And third, lastly, education. Of course, we can't just react to these problems. We have to prevent these problems. We have to teach the locals. We have to teach the tourists. We have to teach pretty much anybody on this issue, on this problem, on these destructions of these mangrove forests, which are severely important um, for us humans, for nature, for animals, for pretty much everything that lives, that thrives on this country, that thrives in these islands. So yeah, it is severely important for us to not only regulate the activity that we have done in these destroyed forests, we have to monitor the well-being, the well-doing of these forests and the contents of these forests. We have to educate not only the locals, not only the tourists, but also people in cities, because what we do in the cities, the trash we throw, the what we do, what we eat, it all comes back to these mangrove forests, to the oceans, to pretty much everything in Indonesia because of how reckless a lot of things are here, not only with people but also um, companies, factories and stuff. So thank you all.
Perfect. Thank you for being so good in time. And the next presentation should come from Elsie Stam from Turkey. We have Elif Dubush already with us. Thank you for sharing the presentation. And we will present it by, as I said, Elif Dubush, Janet Kin, Eylül Umay Külah, and Iclal Chalayan. Sorry, I killed the name, the last name, sorry. The floor is yours, guys. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I try to share my screen, sorry. Can you give the comment, John? Because he will share the screen. Hello again. My name is Iclal. I'm president of LC Istanbul, and today we are talking about how do you create sustainable and healthy forests for people in your own region. Why is thinning so important? Every wood material we use continues to hold carbon, and using the timber, we are able to store the carbon for longer amounts of life. You can see the carbon cycle. With replanting the trees that were cut, we can continue storing carbon. And I will show you some examples. The Fonggong Temple was built in 1056. It has been storing carbon since it was built. And Büyükada, first of all, did you know that the White House is a wooden structure? And Büyükada Greek orphanage, it is the biggest standing wooden structure in Europe. In our country, people are skeptical because they think the wooden buildings are going to burn down. But to show the wood strength, this building hasn't been repaired over 60 years, but it still stands strong. And today, wooden building up to 25 floors can be built. Other than their strength against earthquakes and fires, their biggest importance is they help with storing carbon. We have witnessed the lack of wooden buildings with the recent earthquake. So encasing the use of wood materials with the right forestry does not harmful the forests. And the most important forestry that will facilitate industrial production, plantation forestry. I want to show you summary of plantation life cycle. After planting saplings and periodically thinning them and replanting them, we can ensure the continuation of the plantation cycle. And we aim to teach our people that they can trust wooden buildings, actually, because, you know, we are live in the earthquake place, I guess. So now John will continue the presentation. Thank you.
The current forests are usually overcrowded with diversity, which leaves them susceptible to diseases. We aim to solve the problem via thinning and replanting. We expect the results such as a more diverse wildlife. We believe that education and raising awareness is essential for the overall well-being of the forests. And we make events to raise awareness, such as forest cleanups, where we are able to clean substantial amounts of trash, and forest fire seminars, where the forest engineers mention the causes of wildfires and ways to prevent it. Annual planting events. Every year we have events to plant saplings around our faculty, so we are able to plant more trees that way. Visiting and supporting art exhibitions, such as wooden sculpture and plastic waste installations, where the plastic collected from the forests are utilized. Conclusion. We think that creating new plantations for the purpose of timber to be used to build safer buildings from fires and as well as earthquakes, while supporting projects to help raise awareness will be the best way to approach this problem. Thank you.
Congratulations, another very interesting presentation. Thank you for everybody for keeping the time so punctually. And now we can slowly move forward to the next presentation from Elsie Fuda from Nigeria. We're just waiting for the presentation to come back. And it will be presented by Oyemi Olakanmi Elijah. The floor is yours. You have
Yes.
5 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. All right, thank you very much. My name is Oyemi Olakunmi Elijah. I am the representative for FUTA, IFSA Nigeria. So today I'm going to be talking about generally how do we create sustainable and healthy forest for people in the region. I hope everyone can hear me. Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, because of our time, I'm going to skip through the contents, then I just go straight to the point. So we all need to know we all need to understand the importance of our healthy forest. We know the forests play a crucial role in maintaining the ecological balance of our planet, and they are home to countless species, to flora and fauna, which help to maintain the biological diversity of our planet. And also it plays a significant impact on climate and many other rules. So today we are going to be talking about how to create sustainable and healthy forests for people in the region. The first thing to consider is addressing climate change. Climate change is one of the biggest threats to create healthy and sustainable forests. It is important in increasing carbon sequestration. This can be achieved through activities such as afforestation, where new trees are planted to reduce carbon sequestration and reducing deforestation, which releases carbon into the atmosphere. Then implementing sustainable forest practices. A forest site should be assessed and thereafter sustainable management practices should be implemented. This may include activities such as invasive species removal. These are species that do not grow naturally in the plant site. It can also implement sustainable forest practices also include controlling, then selective logging, monitoring the health of the forest, and preservation of cultural heritage related to the forest. Now, another thing that we need to consider is planting native tree species, which is very important to create an healthy forest and sustainability. As much as we grow exotic species, one of the most important steps in creating a healthy and sustainable forest is planting native species. This is because they adapt to our local climate and soil conditions already, and they also provide important habitat for wildlife. Let us also notice that when selecting native species, it is also important to consider factors such as exposure, moisture levels, and soil type. It is also important to choose a variety of species to increase biodiversity and resilience. However, invasive species, which are non-native plants that can cause harm to the ecosystem by outcompeting native species, should be removed, and this can be done through control burning or using herbicides. Then another thing that is very, very important is engaging your community in forest conservation. Creating a sustainable and healthy forest can merely be achieved alone. It requires the involvement and support of the community to be successful. Some ways to end volunteering opportunities, tree plantings, initiatives, and raising awareness. By working together, you can create a healthier and more sustainable forest that benefits everyone in your region. So in conclusion, because of our time, creating a sustainable and healthy forest is essential for the well-being of both humans and the environment. By implementing sustainable practices and engaging with local communities, we can create forests that provides a range of benefits for generations to come. So let us work together to create a sustainable and healthy forest in our various regions across the world. And this is my last slide. This is showing some of the FUTA LC projects. We normally have forest conservation awareness annually, almost every year during the IFSA week, and we also carry out tree planting and other activities. Thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much for that great presentation. Congrats. We will move on now to the final presentation. Gabby.
Yes, thank you, Marcia. We now move to the final presentation that is in charge of Elsie Chaupea from Mexico and presented by Rafael Luna Reyes. Rafael, you have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I will try to share my screen, so please tell me if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. Well, as we saw, there are many ways in which we can create sustainable and healthy forests for people. My focus, however, will be for the Latin American region. How does Latin America create sustainable and healthy forests for people? Well, there are two main ways in which Latin America has a lot of experience and that has been proved to have a very positive impact when talking about sustainability. The first one is the community forest management approach, which is not limited to the region, but it's quite important in Latin America. We all know that communities have been managing their forests for centuries. They are their original and private gardens. And this approach ensures that the needs and rates of local people are taken into account in taking forest management decisions. This approach helps to achieve a sustainable world because it helps conserve biodiversity, reduces deforestation, promotes sustainable livelihoods, but also supports climate change mitigation. The other way in which Latin America helps to achieve a sustainable world are the payments for ecosystem services. For those who don't know, the payments for ecosystem services are an economic incentive for landowners to conserve and restore ecosystem services, such as carbon sequestration, water conservation, and biodiversity. This scheme was born in Latin America, in Costa Rica to be precise, and many countries have adopted because it not only incentivizes conservation, but also supports local economies, promotes sustainable management practices. Also, it does support climate change mitigation and encourage public and private partnerships. Conservation and forest management is, there are a lot of people that can participate in these activities. Now, how does ORLC contribute to sustainability? Well, here at LC Chaupea, in Chapingo Autonomous University in Mexico, we consider that our different projects can help to achieve a sustainable world in some kind of way. What I will tell just about two of our projects. The first one is our environmental education and outreach program, which promotes awareness, knowledge, and skills about environmental issues. It also promotes creativity and innovation among the people who participate in our activities. and also build some partnership between the people who participate. It does also, finally, it does also foster a culture of sustainability by empowering people and participants to take action for forests. And now our second project for this presentation are our garbage collection and waste separation campaigns. This is very important because we consider that it can help reduce the amount of waste that ends up in landfills or pollutes the environment, but has the main goal of promoting recycling and educating the public, the university community, about proper waste disposal techniques. It does also improve the campus appearance. These activities are focused for university campus. And finally, in some kind of way, it does also improve public health because by removing the waste from wherever it is, it can reduce the potential sources of infection, the presence of vectors, and the transmission of diseases. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Nice.
Thank you so much, Rafael, for this wonderful presentation. And thank you for all the 4LCs to take the time and do this wonderful presentation for the International Day of Forests and this webinar series. Now we are moving to the last questions and answer session. So you can join again to the Slido. You can scan the code or write the number down below. You can ask directly for 1LC if you have any doubt, or maybe the question could be for the 4 of them. So please write your question in the Slido. Okay, we have some questions here. The first one, for LCIPV. Did you get any external support for your project, university or government? This is the question for the LCIPV.
Hold on.
Do you want me to read again the question?
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I got it. I'm sorry. Yes, we got additional scoring for additional data score. Yes, we did.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is also for the LCIPV. Do you have plans of doing your mangrove project in other areas in Indonesia?
As of now, no. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is from LC Chaupea. Has there been a positive increase in forest cover after the incentives are given?
Okay. Yes, when talking about the payment for ecosystem services, sometimes the payment for whatever the project is about carbon sequestration or biodiversity, it can be more creditable for landowners to conserve the forest than using for agriculture or any other activity.
Okay, thank you. And now we have a question for the LC Istanbul. So, you mentioned in your presentation plantation system. Are there any studies were conducted to measure its vulnerability to climate change?
Okay. I'm not sure are there any studies were conducted to measure, but it's a method of afforestation used in many places. Its main purpose is to replace what we have received, actually. So point is, when we cut tree, we should put another tree to nature. Is that clear?
Okay, thank you so much. I saw another question for Elsie Futa. How has your LC incorporate the sustainable practices that you mentioned before?
Okay, thank you very much. Just like I mentioned after the end of the presentation, we normally have, we call it IFSA week in Nigeria. Throughout this week, some of the things we do is going out for public awareness concerning forest conservation. We move about the school premises, then we go outside as well. Then oftentimes we also partner with some forest conservation initiative like Edenwood. And what we do is we go to school and outreaches and we do tree planting. We do tree planting, and these are some of the ways we have been assisting the sustainability issues. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your answer.
Right.
If you have another question, you can write in the Slido right now. Or if we don't have more questions, I think we can move on. Let me see. We have more questions. Just wait me a minute. Okay, this is a question for all the LCs. What improvements regarding sustainability would you like to see in your region? This is for all the LCs, so which one want to start?
I think I can go first. Okay. For Latin America, I think that one of the most important challenges regarding sustainability, and I really would like to see improved, are about the application of legislation. There is a very strong legal legislation in the region, but most of the time it doesn't correctly applied. And also about the thing that most of the Latin American countries, if not all of them, are countries in a development process. So there are a lot of things that we need to solve, like the basic needs of people before thinking something about like sustainability and climate change. That's all from me.
Thank you so much, Rafael. We can follow with Kang Etkin.
Yeah, sorry. At least we would like to see a more, how could I put this? More of an active approach to growing plants in water, because the present way of doing it is a normal way in large fields, and it yields a really small amount of harvest, considering the water costs of all of it. And there's basically basically no effort to transition from ground-based to water-based planting system, and the government isn't doing anything to encourage that.
Thank you so much. Who want to go next? Maybe Raka or the question was, what improvements regarding sustainability would you like to see in your region?
If I could go next.
Yes, of course.
If IPB would actually love to, well, me personally, I would love to see a more regulated approach at pretty much the wildlife trade. Not only because it's an unhealthy approach at diseases and viruses, as we've seen in 2020. It's an unhealthy approach at conservation too. We've had many animals going. We've had many animals go extinct. We've had many animals go endangered, go critically endangered, go vulnerable. We have had a lot of people go sick because of this trade. So yeah, it's not very sustainable for food source, for pretty much anything else. It's very unregulated, and yeah, healthy forest creates healthy people, and that's what we would like to see.
Okay, thank you. I think we missed the question from Hola Cami. I'm not sure if he's still here. Mm. Okay, so if we don't have, okay, thank you. We can move to the next part, please. And we want to finalize this webinar series with a summarize of what we've done in these 3 episodes. Okay, Marcia, the floor is yours.
Sure. So, what we have learned out of those 3 very, very inclusive episodes. So, in the first episode, we learned about the role of forests in carbon sequestration, and we managed to touch the topics of the main carbon pool and the role of the forest in it, the contribution of South Asian countries to carbon issues, the scientific and people-centric approaches, carbon as one of the ecosystem services, IPCC guidelines, carbon assessment methods, and finally, GIS for mapping and carbon storage and sequestration.
Well, in the second episode, that is was about local carbon policies as pillar for global implementation. We have that perspective from 3 different regions, also ways to increase the forest carbon sink, the AU Biodiversity 2030 strategy and bioeconomy development. Also the role of decreasing wood consumption, the role of RECOF in the Asia Pacific region, and finally, the efforts of Mexico in climate change agenda and the impact of international policies on a local level.
Finally, today we had an overview of IUFRO assessment report on forest and human health, and we learned how to build sustainable life in our regions from our members. In case somebody hasn't watched the previous episodes or would like to revisit any points of today's presentations, please go ahead and check the recordings on our IFSA YouTube channel. And now
And
it's
now-
picture time.
Yes, please open your camera and put a big smile to take the picture. Happy to see all your happy faces. We are waiting for a few more persons.
Okay, let's take the picture, everyone. Smile, 1, 2, 3. Okay, maybe one more. Okay. Smile again, everyone. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. And we want to remind you that we are running the International Day of Forest Essay and Photography Competition. The deadline is today. So if you want to participate, please visit this link. And you have until the 23:59 UTC+0 to participate in this wonderful competition. You have time, so you can do it.
And of course, we would like to have your feedback. And well, you can also get your certificate of participation like that. So please fill out the form or scan the QR to access it and let us know how did you find those workshops and how we can do better. We would like to really thank everybody for their participation, not only today, but also the previous weeks. It has been a very intense learning process for everybody, and we really hope that everybody learned something from this. So thank you again for your participation. Thanks to our speakers. And well, we are waiting for you for more webinars and capacity building activities.
Yes, we are looking forward to see all of you in the next IPSA activities. And you can also saw our different activities in the website ipsa.net. Thank you so much.